Oh dear. Good evening, everyone. We'll start the show in a minute. I'm going to wait for everybody to kind of get in. Those that are going to get in, and we'll get started. Pooh. Hello, some random geek in the chat. We're going to get started here in a second.
Welcome to the Tea Party with Marty Abernathy, a show starring a binary trans woman born in the body of a non-binary atheist, trade unionist, equality advocate, and anarcho syndicalist that self-identifies as an unhinged fear pimp, outraged brigade commander, free speech police officer, SJW, and a bad faith agent of chaos.
That is a very topical intro to come in on. By the way, you can go to the teapartypodcast.com to help the show. Join all my socials. If you want to join my Patreon, you can help that way. If y'all didn't notice, I didn't have a show on Wednesday. The reason is basically I had something fall into my pocket, my lap, and that is kind of a controversy. I am an atheist, but by the way, welcome everybody in the chat. Welcome Jordan Joan P and some random geek. I consider myself an atheist, but it's not something that, you know, on this show we get involved in a lot of different topics. We'll do a lot of stuff from TikTok and around the godosphere, looking at basically right-wing people that are being silly. But, so there was a piece that came out. This. Oh, let's see if I can get this camera out a little better. This, that doesn't look like I wanted it to. Let's see if I can get it. Let's see if I can get it to behave. There we go. So this came out. It was an article by Phil Torres called Godless Grifters, How the New Atheist Emerged with the Far Right. And there was a lot of good response to it. And I think anybody that, well, most people that read it would sit there and go, duh. Nerd Teacher says, this is a terrifying view of those specific people and is wildly uncomfortable as a first impression image for tonight. But like, I agree, especially from a trans point of view. And I'll be honest with you, this is going to be a long show. There's a lot to go over, because basically this caused a controversy, not because most people didn't agree with it, but there was a few people that were in the atheist community that were supposedly progressive. One of them being Eli Bosnick, and the other being Thomas Smith, that criticized this piece. And we're going to get into it. But tonight, this is going to be very clip laden. So we're going to get on with it. I'm going to stop this every so often when I have commentary. So this was, there's basically three different sections to this. There is the interview that Kevin and Christy did with Thomas Smith. The podcast that, I could have went into Thomas's podcast, and I could have went into Eli's. But to be honest with you, like literally, like there was a lot of editing that I had to do. Still, with all that I want to talk about, there's an hour and a half's worth of stuff in here, so I'm probably going to go for 2 hours. But that being said, if I would have used all the stuff that was available, this show would be 4.5, 5 hours long, and I didn't want to do that. So I did some editing, but this is from Kevin and Christy's show with Thomas Smith. But you have to think about this chronologically. Thomas came out with his podcast, basically criticizing Phil's piece. And then Ina, Nice Mangoes, from Polite Conversations, basically came out with a podcast basically saying Thomas was, and it didn't mention Thomas by name, but it was basically going over why what he said and did with Phil's piece wasn't healthy. So anyways, we need to get started because there's so much to go over. So this starts, like I said, there's 3 bits. There's this, there's Ina's podcast, and then I took some from Kevin and Christy's show with Ina that was last night. So let's get started. Hopefully we get started.
So.
And I also find, as atheists, we tend to be interested in like some of these logical fallacies, bad argumentation things. And it also struck me as sort of that when you look at this headline, and I was trying to piece together, like, how are they defining new atheists? Because I think there are 2 possible coherent definitions. You could just go with the 4 horsemen or whatever, like the main leaders, which clearly they're not doing here. Phil isn't doing here because there's a lot of other people in. Or you can define it more broadly to be like basically everyone. If you're getting to the point where James Lindsay was a new atheist that counts in this article, then I definitely was too. I was, like I'm as prominent as James Lindsay was for atheism.
I don't think that's probably something you want to think is a good thing, but yeah, whatever. By the way, if you want to join in the conversation about this at any point, I do have a Google Meets open.
That's why I could have him on my show. He was a nobody. I had a small show at that time.
Yeah, I was about to say, you did have him on your show to promote an article that you'd written at the time, yeah?
Yeah, a couple things back in the day before he really just absolutely took this awful turn. He was a totally different person. It was really weird.
Here's the thing. This transitions to a clip from Ina talking about new atheism versus atheism and Thomas's criticism.
I was looking back.
Seems like a pretty obvious thing to say, really, if you've watched the absolute dumpster fire that is the online atheist scene carefully, or if you've been listening to my mini-series Woking Up, which you can find on this very podcast feed, you'll know that this isn't really a bold or outrageous claim, and probably something that only bothers people who are pretty right-wing themselves, and so are blind to the problem, or those who still have some defensiveness around their identity as an
That's better. I think it's the defensiveness, but we'll get into that later.
Atheist, which I don't know why you would, because this isn't really a criticism of godlessness. I'm so tired of repeating that as an atheist myself. But a lot of people conflate criticism of new atheism with a criticism of atheism on the whole. And it really...
This is something that I think is really important to talk about. Because what Thomas or Phil or Ina even doesn't talk about is the history of new atheism versus the history of atheism since basically the beginning of the internet, when basically everyone got online and had broadband. I think it was roughly around 2000, definitely by 2001, and there was a budding community, an atheist community online. So I'll continue.
Isn't the same thing. Criticism of new atheism.
Also, to me, new atheism is a brand. It's a brand and it's a community.
Atheism is about a very specific manifestation, a very specific scene, an online community centered around and splintering from a group of specific thought leaders known as the Four Horsemen, and what they've sort of turned this scene into and who they've allied with throughout the years and the results of all that. This isn't like a very clearly defined movement. There's no official New Atheism membership cards, just like the things it's morphed into in more recent times, like the IDW. It's like a broader term for a certain type of atheist involved in a certain online community.
You have to think about all this too as kind of like a tree growing and the branches coming from it, because it's not just one movement. It's not two movements. Initially, you had a branching off. You could say that there was a branching off in 2011, 2012. Basically, after Elevator Gate happened, soon after you had a conversation between people about atheism plus. And so there was atheism plus, and then there was the new atheist, basically.
Which, as much as people like to deny, definitely had or has its own ideology and set of beliefs and politics.
Some random geek in the chat says Elevator Gate and then later Gamergate. Yep, they were all branches off of this tree. There were all people that came from or even, and this is something that Ina will say later, they were lifted up by these new atheist thought leaders. They were lifted up. So you maybe they aren't on the far right, but they're lifting up people that are or were, because of their lifting up, they became these far right thought leaders
that just aren't accurately represented by statements like atheism is just a lack of belief in gods, and there's no politics that comes with simply not believing in God. You know, these are all well-known excuses to sort of deny the right and far-right problems in the new atheist scene.
And I mean, there are so many pieces of this. If you know the history, like I said, you'll see that there are different parts of this that include people you wouldn't even think of. People like Jordan Peterson. I mean, when you have Jordan Peterson, now, why would I say Jordan Peterson? Well, there was this. There's a meeting between Harris, Peterson, and Douglas Murray. Billed as the Woodstock of live speaking and debate. Let's see if I can take this in a bit so you guys can see it better. You probably don't want to see it better, but yeah, because I had to do some shrinkage on this. So yeah. So there were 8,000 people at this event. Like, so you're talking about Sam Harris, Jordan Peterson, and Douglas Murray. So I mean, when this is emerging. I mean, Jordan Peterson doesn't have anything to do with atheism per se. He's a Christian. But there are people that lifted him up. Matt Dillahunty went on a tour with them. It's all part of the tree. I mean, American atheism tabling, having a table at CPAC. I mean, there are things like this that, because in 2018, Jordan Peterson and Harris did a speaking tour with Pangburn Philosophy. Pangburn facilitated the formalization of the IDW by inviting in all these free speech preachers to travel around and hang out with each other for certain well-funded events. I mean, the one that I particularly remember was with Matt Dillahunty. So I'm like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? Having a debate with this guy, you're just elevating him to your level. Anyways, let's listen to more of what Ina's saying here.
We'll get into those in more detail in a bit. The reason I'm putting this episode out now is because there was this Salon article recently titled Godless Grifters, How the New Atheists Merge with the Far Right by Phil Torres. And it got a pretty good response. It resonated with a lot of people, clearly, and went viral and upset the usual apologists and IDW fans and right-wing atheists. But also got some weird-ass, pedantic, nitpicking, and tone policing from people I always assumed understood the basics of this shit. So, this episode here is my attempt to debunk what I consider to be extremely harmful content that tries to undermine what a lot of people who watch and research these things have been saying for years. And this was coming from inside the house. This isn't anything personal against anyone. It is just about taking apart terrible arguments, excusing terrible things. If you're going to put out defenses of new atheism and the rational genius brains within it based on extremely weak shit, I'm going to have to say something, especially if it's coming from someone that many trust for decent criticism of the atheist scene. So, yeah, imagine my surprise and my perpetual exhaustion. Not only do we have to do this whack-a-mole, constantly refuting bullshit from the right, but we have to do it with the centrists, and sometimes even people on the left can be useful idiots, and bigotry apologists or legitimizers. And I hate to say it, you know, some of my best friends are white men. Nothing against them or anything, but sometimes it really does put massive blinders on to exist within such a privileged group. When the stakes of what these fuckers are doing are not that high for you personally, you can sort of kick back and analyze their awfulness as some abstract, vague thing, as just a mere intellectual exercise. But some of us don't have that luxury. So we have to watch it like a hawk and be aware of who they're playing footsie with and what impact that has on minority groups that some of us may belong to. The issues surrounding that stuff.
Yes, and I think that the people...
This was actually from Christy and Kevin's show, but it was along the same topic.
You know, defensive about new atheism on the left still do know that, because they do know better. They know that this isn't about atheism as a whole, but somehow that defensiveness and tribalism is making that conflation happen for some people. So there's also that Mott and Bailey happening, right? Where you're like, where there was one of these defending new atheism episodes was like, oh, you, the listener, are being smeared by this author. And it just had this like creepy preacher kind of tone, you know? You are being smeared and, you know, look at us.
That was Eli Bosnick, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We are, you know, the most progressive demographic and, you know.
Which is bullshit. I mean, that's the thing. Like, you have to... what drives me crazy in all of this is that no one is talking about the splits that happen. The splits that happen, and you know, before the show. Actually, I'm just going to leave that down. But before the show, well, I was on Facebook and I was talking to a few people. I'm trying to see where I wrote it. I wrote it down. I think I wrote it down. I can just go to Facebook. But one of the people that I consider to be kind of atheism plus-ish, or kind of in that progressive crowd, is Stephanie Zahn. And listen, she did comment. Because I posted and I said, tonight I'm doing a show on new atheism. I'm thinking people like P.Z. Myers and Greta Christina that seem to have left mainline atheism that I would also define as new atheism. Stephanie took me to task for that. She said, one of the strangest things around the narrative of new atheism for me is that I have been and still am a part of mainline atheism. I did atheist talk and was a board member of Minnesota Atheists throughout the whole conflict. I've never been working with the key people, if not always the top leadership at national orgs. Secular Woman is a member of the Secular Coalition. Even atheist celebrity isn't a new phenomenon. Madeline Murray O'Hare was a frequent guest on network talk shows when the network still had a monopoly-ish and bigger audiences than anything today. And there were conflicts around celebrity versus community organizing in her day too. So I'm not even in agreement with everyone else about the arguments, what the arguments are about necessarily. For me, this is and was and continues to be a question of who we're organizing for, when we organize, and what the constituency needs. And I think that's spot on. But it is important to acknowledge that there was a split in the atheist community, and that there's a difference between the celebrity atheists, the leftist atheists, and the far right atheists. I think it's important, but it seems like that's not well defined. So I'm going to continue on with Ina's point. I think I am.
No, but that's not accurate, because we're talking about a very specific movement. We're not talking about the average atheist out on the street. That's the demographic being measured. And also that demographic is a conflation, because it's often the nuns, right? Which are not all atheists. People use
spiritual but not religious. It is included.
People, or just people who don't identify with a religion, but maybe they believe in God, or who knows? They're the nuns. And also how these things might misread people, like, as was pointed out in the panel, like Shermer as being one of the progressives, because he would answer, yes, of course I'm pro-trans rights.
This is from a Michael Shermer show. He literally had somebody on that was talking about irreversible damage, what we're doing to our daughters. Virulently anti-trans author.
Yes, of course I'm, against anti-Muslim bigotry. But when you look at that,
Hirsi Ali. The book is Immigration, Islam, and the Erosion of Women's Rights. And it's called Pray.
Practically, that's not true. These people like to think they are, so they would answer the polls in that way. But it's not true.
Yeah. And you can point to good people, that's fine, but pointing to good people doesn't deal with the problem.
Exactly. We want to deal with the problem, because this has been a widespread problem for a very long time. And this constant effort to just kind of shrink it to a few bad apples, that is what's, that is kind of like that playing devil's advocate clip that you played. It's like, it's exhausting, because we've had this fight with the right. We don't, I'm not shocked or, so heartbroken over what the freaking Kekistan atheists are saying or doing, because I've made my peace with that. That is a lot of them. Well, Kekistan is an outdated term, but that was a joke.
Yes.
Well, we like to get pedantic, so let me just clarify.
Well, those of us who are old enough to remember Kekistan.
Yeah. So the fact that this is coming from inside the house, Christy, that is what has been extremely hurtful, harmful, and felt threatening, if you can understand that. And that's why I'm so exhausted, because I've already had these pylons and fights with the right-wing atheists, sometimes with the centrist atheists, and now it's just opening the floodgates on the left again, and people are not willing to self-examine or just kind of introspect at how this is not really that controversial of a statement. We should not be fighting over this. Instead, we should think and be like, is this worth our time or not? Is this worth the damage that it's caused? No. And it's the people who open this discussion that should be at fault for it, not the people saying, don't do that.
And I think that was Jordan Joan P said, I used to watch it back when it first started. They unsubscribed when a lot of the trans topic went to on trans topics. Like one guy started a big feud why I won't date trans women. Yeah, that's the thing. Most of these spaces are very anti-trans, and it's not based in science. It's not based in any kind of it's not based on any kind of investigation. It's based on basic biology of turfdom and of basically anti-science people. They claim to be science based, but their science doesn't. It's the basic biology, folks. So Ino went on to talk about this.
That's a thing that happens.
So when you have someone like that saying, let's not lump all of these people as far right, it comes off as minimizing a thing that is actually happening and not listening to minorities on the thing that is actually happening. Like, I have to say, throughout this whole
it's funny because there's two chats. There's my chat and Kevin's chat here, but you can see somebody commented there. Ultimately, both TERFs and the far right are appealing to traditionalism, the status quo, and that's so fucking true. But that kind of upholding of the status quo goes out again. It's like a tree with roots. It goes with through the secular community. It goes into the gamer community. It goes into bait bro culture. It goes into all these different places, but it's all the same. It's an appeal to traditionalism, to conservatism, to the far right. So hence why there's this merging
thing in the past few weeks. Some of the people who have really understood the urgency of what I'm saying and have reached out to me have been trans people, because I feel like they have felt what it's like to be a target of new atheists to a similar level that someone of a Muslim background might have felt it. I don't want to compare the two struggles at all, but those targets have been very clear.
Like you didn't go into it to provoke anything.
This is back from Thomas. Him talking about Christy's going to define new atheism, but Thomas here, let's give some.
Like that wasn't your intention, but there was a lot of let's call it pushback on that. And damn it, what was my point? I had a couple of them as you were talking, and then I should write this stuff down because I follow your conversation. But first on the definitions of new atheism. I talked. It's been a while now, but with Stephen Cattell of the UK, who actually studies atheism as a movement, and. Yeah, the term new atheism it describes kind of like a time point, a time period, or at least it did the last time.
I disagree with that. Like I said, I think it describes a brand. Maybe it does. Maybe it's these multiple things, but it's a brand. It's a celebrity brand.
This is kind of like when the splits were starting, again, 2015, 2016, when the political differences, as opposed to unifying around, again, being against creationists and religious encroachment. But damn it, what was my point? Sorry. Yes, the term new atheism, I think if the headline would have said the new atheists, who are a pipeline or merging with the new right, would have maybe been a little bit better and more accurate. I don't think...
Here's the thing. Some random geek says Thomas Smith is an anti-anarchist, or he won't listen to Behind the Bastards because the host Robert Evans is an anarchist. Like, this is like my experience with this guy. He's very feelings based. It's not a look at the facts, it's a look at his feelings. He centers his feelings around everything. That's my experience.
Had it.
Yeah, and I think I talked a little bit off air or before we came on about the difference between the intellectual like conversations that we're having, like let's have a think. And I agree because, I do that all the time. And as I said, too, like as a political scientist, of course, I want very granular measurements, right? So I want there to be an ordinal scale of, far right to center right to set.
This is where Christy is trying to get Thomas to understand about his privilege and what these discussions are. They're not just about definitions of words.
Center because.
And that it's not just some, let's have this discussion. And it doesn't hurt anyone because it doesn't hurt him. No, Adam, here's the thing. I've had my disputes and disagreements, and I have reasons for not quite liking Christy all that much. But in these shows, she actually was trying to get him to understand about privilege, and he just wasn't having it. Even they walked on eggshells talking to this guy.
And honestly, it makes our maths easier. But there's that component of it. And one of the things the other thing I was talking about is, trying to listen more to, like I have white privilege, right? I've got my academic way of thinking and conceptualizing privilege. And then there are people whose lives are literally on the line, like we've talked about. And I know you're going to be sympathetic with this, Thomas, because you believe the same thing that, I
know. I mean, if she was in a court of law, that would have been called leading the witness. Like, I know you believe this, Thomas. But he really doesn't. At least not. He doesn't prove that he does in the way he treats Ina.
People who experience these policies don't have the luxury I do, personally, again, me, to just be so conceptual about it and be so detached. And I guess if one thing I've learned from the pushback, if you want to say, is to be more open to hearing the exhaustion of people who are feeling under attack all the time, and to understand that these aren't academic debates. These are some people's lives. And again, you agree with all of this. Know all these things, right? I know. I'm not saying anything that anyone in this room disagrees with. And so that is part of the thing that I like about the progressive part of atheism, is that we do have a commitment to intersectionality. And here, even on this thing, when Kevin was asking you questions, you're trying to be open. You're not trying to be open. You're being open and taking on his ideas, engaging with them. And
what's funny is she's building him up, like trying to say, you agree with this, right? You agree with this, trying to push him in a certain direction to get him to talk about it. And his responses are just, it's kind of this look right here. It's kind of like, what are you talking about? I have no idea. Oh my God. Like I just want to go. Like that. It's going through his head the whole time.
I think that is the thing that that will make us stronger. So I'm not, again, this isn't like a criticism toward you. I'm just saying that these conversations sometimes can happen on different levels. And I tend to live in the conceptual level because I don't have to live in the, I'm not having Richard Dawkins's anti-Muslim Islamophobic, comments tweeted at me. or his transphobic comments or anything. I don't have to live with that. And so I guess if nothing else,
Well,
I'll wrap it up in a second.
Yeah.
What I've taken away from this is that understanding, especially in the atheist movement, which does tend to be not very diverse, that listening to those people's experiences and listening to their conversations and having those conversations is also an important part of our activism. Again, we're in 100% agreement. I just wanted to say it out loud.
And I think that it's fair to say why
Christy has said all this, and this is the kind of stuff he comes back with.
waste your time on this. I get that. We can disagree, and I think, I would, again, if I had to do over again, I wouldn't bother, because I don't care that much about this for it to have been worth any of the trouble. I just thought it was an interesting thing to talk about, and I thought among good faith people, we could have had a conversation about, like, should we label these people as far right, or has the right itself? This is something I actually.
But I want to kind of reiterate that we're talking on a very conceptual level here. And when someone says, look, if someone, like, I understand what you're saying, Thomas, about you don't want to broad brush stroke everybody, because then 70% of the population is going to be Nazis. And what do you do with that, right? But I can also understand.
Some random geek in the chat says good faith people. Yeah, that's the ironic part in this. If you disagree with Thomas or don't treat him with kid gloves like this, like on the show, like they're doing, walking on eggshells, if you're like Ina and you just say it how it is, then Thomas gets mad and doesn't and pulls out the good faith people.
And where someone might come from saying, well, if you want to say a pipeline to the right, or right adjacent, or a right ally, or far right ally, just add far to all those things. Like, does it even really fucking matter? Like, okay, so Sam Harris goes and sits down at, like, we agree, at a table of 10 Nazis. What do you have? You have 11 Nazis. And again, I think that's, I understand where people are coming from. When they aren't interested in the kind of nuances that we think are definition, kind of really important, because the issues, I just want to say, let me just finish, because the issues that are at stake, I think, is what they would say. Look,
I can't believe that fucking Christy is the one that is, she keeps trying to talk to Thomas about privilege, and he keeps not getting it.
Isn't the important thing the issues, not the labels, right? Is atheism part of a movement, to make things better, or are you there to, like, take different parts of it for your movement? Is this an atheist movement focus, or is this a values movement focus? Does that make sense in terms of, like, the two different perspectives?
But as far as the actual article goes, I feel like it's the most basic criticism one could do of a thing, which is to say, the headline, "Godless Grifters: How the New Atheists Merged with the Far Right." For one, I think it overstates what happened, and for another, I just found it odd to read the article and find that the article doesn't even try to support that claim. And so,
he said earlier in this piece that Phil Torres didn't pick the title, and then they complain that it's clickbait. Hello, it's the internet. Clickbait works. That's why they do it. Why don't you, like, be a grandpa and yell at the sky? Clickbait works. That's why they do it. You can be upset about it, but to say that this article, like, doesn't prove the point is just bullshit.
I thought it was at least interesting to talk about. I mean, look at the Lawrence Krauss section of that article. The
funny thing about that, he brings this up where he doesn't agree with the Lawrence Krauss part, right? So let's look it up, because it's on this moral. Because you wouldn't think, because of Krauss, if you just were if you didn't read the piece, You wouldn't know that it was said down here. New atheism appeared to offer moral clarity. It emphasized intellectual honesty, and it embraced scientific truths about nature and the workings of reality. It gave me immense hope to know that the world was overflowing with irrationality, that there were clear-thinking individuals with sizable public platforms willing to stand up for what's right and true, and to stand up for sanity in the face of stupidity. Fast forward to the present. What a grift that was. Most of the new atheists turned out to be nothing more than self-aggrandizing, dogmatic, irskipple, centrist, morally compromised people who at every opportunity have propped up the powerful over the powerless, the privileged over the marginalized. This may sound hyperbolic, but it's not when you look at the evidence. So I thought it might be illuminating to take a look at where the heavy hitters in the atheist and skeptic communities are today. What do their legacies look like? In what direction have they taken their cultural quest to secularize the world? When you read it, talking about Krauss and willing to stand up for what's right and true, and about moral clarity, Krauss belongs to be there. So it just showed me that either Thomas didn't read the entire thing, or he wanted to make Krauss being in this article a thing that it didn't. I mean, it didn't match the title, but like, that's pedantic to the extreme, to not even mattering. Because if you read the article, what I just read, this talks about literally why it's included in there. So it pisses me off that he even he said that, but it's not surprising.
There's not a single mention of right-wing anything. All the Lawrence Krauss stuff is what, he's a sex creep, like a lot, like a couple of the people in the article. And I just found that interesting. And all I was going to do, initially I tweeted this out, and you can go find it if you want. And I said, hey, I agree with all of this in the article, but I feel like far right goes a little too far. It doesn't make the case. And I tried to emphasize that as much as I could. And
here's the thing too. Far right for who? Maybe it doesn't feel like the far right for you because you're not the fucking focus. You're not a Muslim, or you're not a trans person. You're not being attacked online by these people every day. So you don't get to decide what they are and are not, because you have no skin in the game. This is this literally is a game for you. You're going, let's have a discussion. We should have a debate. Meanwhile, while our lives are being debated, our lives are being discussed, our lives are being put on this scale and talked about, and our voices aren't there. Our voices aren't uplifted in the community.
And I would have just left it there, except that I was thinking it over, and I thought it was a chance to talk about some interesting things. Like, for one, how are we defining far right, and is it helpful to try to find a way to assign people far right as quickly as we can? Like the minute they are, for example, are like not accepting trans people.
See, this is funny because, well, I'm just going to play the rest.
Anyone who listens to my show knows that that's a huge battle of mine. And
anyone that listens to his show knows that's a huge battle for him. That's a huge battle of his. He's trans, so I mean, he's very committed to the trans fight because he's really involved with it.
And I'm really proud of the episode that Lindsay and I did, 2 episodes on the...
He did episodes, so he's really committed to trans rights. He did episodes about interesting things that he would like to talk about and debate.
The End of Gender, this awful transphobic book that she broke down expertly. And we literally were like yelling at Richard Dawkins over this. The fact that he tweeted this out and uncritically and was like, oh, if even half this is true, then blah, blah, blah. So I would, I guess at a certain point I have to trust that people listening to me know where I'm coming from. You know, like,
yeah, you're a cis white guy. Oh, I know where you're coming from. You're a cis white guy who has no skin in the game, discussing issues that don't involve you and giving your opinion about it anyways.
Like they know the history and what I stand for and all that. And I thought it was an opportunity to talk about, like, how do we define far right? Who is it accurate to label people as far right? And also some historical stuff. Like, I think,
yeah, what he's saying here, and we'll talk about it later on, is that he can get anti-trans people so that anti-trans people aren't far right. That's what he's saying here. Anti-trans people aren't far right. They're gettable.
There's been a retconning of James Lindsay as some new atheist hero when he was not at all. It's not that important, but I just thought it was, you know, it's when you do a show, you know, it's
I haven't heard him.
Things. Yeah,
until CRT. That's when sorry, grievance studies. His conceptual penis thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, his fraud. That's when I got first heard about him.
Now, this is coming up is Ina talking about how it's not just a straight thing to the far right.
And I was as defending, playing footsie with, focusing on similar issues as, providing far-right talking points with more credibility. I mean, you're not really grappling with what's being said in the article at all if you think it's as simple as saying that, you know, Sam Harris is basically Mike Cernovich now. That's not what's being claimed at all. But you're lying to yourself if you don't see how some of the lines there have blurred or merged even. Like when Sam spreads great replacement theories about Muslim birth rates, when he goes on about how Europe is being destroyed for demographic reasons, when he promotes Caliber Weekly or Quillette, when the things you hear on his show are the same points you hear on PragerU or Ben Shapiro, when he uses his platform to defend Tucker Carlson and says that it has to be well within the Overton window to ask on Tucker's White Power Hour if diversity is our strength or not. When he censors his own guest for criticizing white nationalist Stefan Molyneux too hard. When he, on his massive influential platform to his very large audience, signals that he's threatening to quit Patreon because they deplatformed Lauren fucking Southern. And when he does finally quit Patreon, it's because they deplatformed Sargon of Akkad, known for telling women things like, I wouldn't even rape you. Sargon, who ran for fucking UKIP. I guess it's not enough to point to when Sam says things like Shapiro is more intellectually honest than Ezra Klein, or that he would vote for Ben Carson over Chomsky because that was a while ago, so that doesn't count apparently. But how about when he says the left is smearing Steve Bannon as a particular kind of racist and xenophobe? Steve Bannon, who proudly declared his publication the platform for the alt-right. And what about when he minimizes things like the Christchurch mass shooting to an audience of millions, saying that it's just trolling and not genuine ideology, despite a massive fucking manifesto echoing similar great replacement stuff that Sam, too, has said himself. Something he won't apologize for, retract, or back down from even now. What about when he finds a way to blame wokeness for Trump being elected and excuses these poor people who voted Trump because of pronouns and not being able to wear blackface on Halloween? Or when he finds a way to indirectly blame wokeness even for the insurrection? Or when he helped kickstart and fund Dave Rubin's career?
I love this because she just rips apart, because before this episode, and he's not come out and said that it was because he watched her episode, but I know he did, because he's come out afterwards and says he thinks that Sam Harris now is far right, but in his podcast he didn't. But she just utterly destroys any semblance of an idea that Sam Harris is not far right.
Dave Rubin, who has become the chosen platform for sanitizing the far right, or when he built Majid Nawaz's career. Majid, who was promoting flawed research adored by the far right, claiming that Pakistanis were overrepresented in grooming gangs, and who basically went full QAnon during the previous US election. And Sam didn't say a word to step back and disassociate. And I don't see what anyone who cares about opposing right-wingery and bigotry in the atheist scene gets out of denying it. What is the goal here? New atheism morphed into the IDW and Quillette sphere, and there are still constantly little splits and rifts happening within that scene too. Some reinvent themselves to retain more liberal cred, and some just go full white genocide like James Lindsay. But that doesn't mean they aren't all engaged in the same vile, dangerous project of shifting the Overton window further and further right, terrified by challenges to the status quo.
No matter what the fuck you call them. You know, if they're not in this club, they're going towards the same thing. They're supporting the same thing. They're supporting traditionalism. They're supporting the status quo.
It just means that someone like Helen differs in preferred tactics from what Lindsay has become today. It doesn't mean they aren't all powered by anti-wokeness, that they all didn't get their start in new atheism with two of the literal horsemen boosting them all the fucking time. The lines here are all fuzzy, entangled and intertwined. New atheism was powered by anti-SJW-ness, which has become the IDW to include other right-wingers that aren't career atheists or atheists at all even, and that is now powered by the new manifestation of anti-SJW-ness, which is anti-wokeness and anti-CRT. The point is to recognize this shit and its patterns and the project for what it is, rather than try to make excuses based on pedantry. You have to understand how all these pieces fit together and work together, how they're all cogs in the right-wing spin machine. To split hairs and deny that James Lindsay was never a new atheist is just such a terrible look, honestly. Who decides this? Is there a membership that he was refused? Oh, he didn't speak at any of the major conferences, so that's why he's not a new atheist? What about all the die-hard Harris, Dawkins, and Hitchens fans that aren't public speakers or public figures? Are they also not new atheists because they didn't speak at any major conferences? He was absolutely part of the scene. He was absolutely in the online anti-SJW atheist circuit. He had the same politics and views that were expected in the scene. He was propped up and celebrated repeatedly by new atheists and leading figures in the scene, as were Helen and Peter. Sure, they weren't as known as they are today, but no one is claiming that anyway. Did they wear t-shirts self-identifying as new atheists? No, probably not. And yes, of course, the whole movement gained more steam when they merged with the right and far right and didn't restrict themselves just to atheism-related discussion. But it's delusional to deny which scene these grifters originated in and were amplified by in their early days. To say new atheism merged with the far right isn't to say they retained their exact original form, but it is to say that they came together and worked with the right and far right to fight against their common enemies, the left and wokeness and CRT and whatever bogeyman comes next.
You are correct. So where does Thomas go?
Where to even start, you know, because like this isn't something that I would have considered even important enough to do a show on or another guest appearance on, like honestly. And I think that's important to say because a lot of the like legitimate criticism has been a focus criticism, like why are you even bothering? And I think that's a criticism I take seriously. Yeah, just because again, I think that look, it's just sloppiness. And again, it sounds like the biggest legitimate criticism of my episode is that I shouldn't have taken the time. I mean, I think that everyone in good faith can understand that the plain meaning of this headline.
Again, note the plain meaning and the people of good faith
is that new atheism merged with the far right. But if the criticism is it's not worth picking that apart because, kind of what Christy said. I mean, this is something that's not worth even the appearance of being on the other side of. Maybe that's true. And if that's true, then, like I said, if I had to do it over again, I would probably either not do the episode or speak about it very differently.
Yeah. So what exactly is going on with Thomas? Over on Twitter. I'm trying to bring this over. I can't. I don't know if I can. What's going on with him over on Twitter? What's he doing? Like, Ina's literally has screenshots, receipts. She said, I'm going to do a thread about new atheism podcast drama you may have seen because I have had enough of the misrepresentations, meltdowns, frankly. And it's tragic that anyone in this conversation at all, when it comes calling out how new atheism did in fact merge with the far right. For a while now, months, I have been seeing troubling patterns and subtle IDW apologetics coming from corners of the more progressive IDW critical podcaster bros, which may be alarming because I didn't think we had to deal with the outsider of right-wing atheists. It's been especially concerning because of how it's been camouflaged in criticism of the lower hanging fruit of the IDW, Lindsay / Weinsteins, while still minimizing and defending the more slippery IDWers like Harris. So many people usually spot this stuff. So usually the people that spot this stuff don't see it. I did a guest appearance on I Don't Speak German pod to talk about this, and the host and me were mildly critical of Thomas Smith. I wasn't even thinking of him as one of the people I was warning about at the time. Then Phil Torres released the article that we talked about. Sadly and shockingly, I saw Thomas Smith had released an episode saying that new atheism didn't merge with the far right. It was surprising because I thought he had got what was happening here, and he had been critical of the scene in the past. I wasn't prepared for someone I once considered a friend choose this hill after everything we've witnessed this toxic scene go through. I avoided listening to it for a day because even the idea of him defending it was hurtful. Anyways, I got through it eventually, and I had to listen to it again because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. There was all kinds of pedantry and semantic arguments. Thus, this defending new atheism depended on really seems like grasping at straws. So she goes on and says some more stuff about it. But then she says, but in hopes of minimizing drama and making it about the issues, not the people, I decided not to call anyone out when she did her podcast. This was weirdly interpreted as hostile move because my intent was the opposite. Had I called him out directly, I would be criticized for singling him out, which she would. There's no winning in some situations, but you still have to push back on the harmful things, in my opinion. Before the episode was released publicly, Thomas started complaining on his Facebook group. And after remaining quiet in the face of him saying all sorts of things about me, I think I will just share this because I've had enough harassment and gaslighting. Plus, he literally asked what I could possibly be referring to, as it was implied I was being unfair. So there are screenshots of gaslighting here. Thomas said, I'll be honest, I haven't ever listened to her show. This is 100% a mystery to me, other than it seems like she's taken a weird tone. First off, Thomas in other places says that he helped create her show. But he's never listened to her show. And says that he was treated better than Sargon. Sargon's the person that humiliated him at MythCon. I didn't help him start his podcast for free when his co-host tried to fuck him over. Like, so which is it, Thomas? You've never listened to her show, or you've helped start her podcast, which is hilarious because the only other person that has said that that they helped start her podcast was Sam Harris, which is so anyways, going back and forth, and I've had multiple I'm trying to get through to him, had multiple conversations about this, like, but after a while you just get to the point where you're like, Jesus Christ, this guy does not he does not get it, and he doesn't want to get it. He literally tweets this kind of shit. Literally smearing Ina behind a private Facebook group of 600 people, 600 people. That's what he's concerned about. Ina, stop posting things from a private SIO Facebook group. You do not have my permission to be in there. I do not understand why you have ignored my pleas for you to stop tweeting out to your entire audience. These things are meant for a small private group, Facebook group. Fucking stop. And then he says, do you not understand how invasive this is? I now do not have the ability to post anything to the group of friends that doesn't go out to your entire audience. It's unreal. Just stop, please. And I said, do you understand how invasive your words are? How you continue to center yourself instead of listening to others? You're actually more concerned with the ethics of posting screenshots than your actual words inside those screenshots. It's unfucking believable. I mean, the guys, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of when the stuff was released about the hack of the DNC servers. But I'm just like, what? You know, or not DNC servers, but the oh God, I forget the guy's name. He had a Gmail account, and he was one of Hillary Clinton's top aides. And the Russians basically hacked this guy's account and got all this information. But mind you, it was true. The information was true. All the leaked stuff about the DNC was true. But they were like, they never denied that what was in the emails wasn't true. They were just pissed off that people had seen that information, that they had been hacked. The DNC had been hacked, and the literal truth was out there. And this is what Thomas is pissed off that the truth is out there. And I'm just like, Jesus Christ. Really? Really? So instead of listening to Ina and the criticism of him, he decides to just double down in typical cis white het fashion.
So it just seemed like a very strange exercise to me. The rest of the complaints seem to be based on strawmanning the article and splitting hairs about individual words. Is so-and-so really far right? Or did they really merge? Are they really a grifter? Or, trying to make excuses around technicalities, like claiming someone wasn't a new atheist, just a regular atheist, therefore not a problem relating to new atheism. Just really appallingly weak arguments, grasping at straws. So bizarre.
If no one had that context at all, I get why they might think it was pedantic to spend any time on this. I actually get that. And that's why maybe I should have, I would have done things differently.
Well,
but for anyone who knows me, I wouldn't have thought it would.
See, again, here we go. If anybody, you're not engaging me in good faith if you don't agree with me. I mean, literally, Christy, of all people, who's not like, it sounds like she's coming to understand privilege and the dynamics of how it works, but she's not an expert in it, and she's trying to explain to him in the kindest, like, here you go, here, understand, and he's still just resistant to it. So when somebody like me or Ina just is not going to play the walking on Kevin's look, the is not going to play those games. He just, I'm being attacked, when he's literally the one that is harming communities by this pedantic bullshit.
Sizing you as pedantic. I'm just talking. I'm not saying you were pedantic, by the way. So I don't want you
to
think.
I think you were representing that argument, and I'm happy to respond to that criticism. I didn't take it personally or anything. Don't worry.
Okay.
But yes, that exhaustion.
And this goes back to Ina on their show talking about this. He's not engaging in.
And that, don't ally you are, unless, like, I can see it in the real world. You know what I mean? The first instance that you are challenged by a woman of color, if you completely fall apart, have multiple meltdowns, turn to just flat out lying and not addressing any of the points. Or
literally, Thomas called her an abuser and a liar. She's done neither, but you're calling a woman of color. I mean, that's you're not being nice enough. Like, literally, you have to come to Thomas on your hands and knees in the way that Kevin and Christy did, or you're not good faith. It's absurd. By the way, welcome to the chat, Essence of Thought. Welcome.
Will address them only if someone else will come and say them to you in a way that is extremely sugar-coated and soft and gentle, then I don't see that allyship there. And that's what I mean when I say eye-opening. It's been really something to observe all of this stuff around Mergegate, and then the playing devil's advocate. These types of pedantic arguments are just like minor little, conceptual things that for some people, but
you think you had a very significant issue with the nitpicking on semantics of the word merge in the podcast, you put like an echo thing over the word merge every time it was said. Just thought it was quite funny. You were particularly annoyed by the sort of, I suppose, what you might conceive as pedantry in the face of bigotry.
Right.
Yeah. And you put out actually, I thought it was quite an informative timeline of events on Twitter as well, which I thought was really useful. And you said you'd been noticing this for several months now. This wasn't just like an isolated thing.
Years.
Oh,
Kevin.
years. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So in what form had that arisen over years?
Well, it's just kind of how like even the left podcasting sphere of atheism or skeptosphere or IDW criticism, whatever that world niche is, has been very much a boys club, right? And you see that, circle jerk all the time.
It's not just a boys club, it's a cis het white boys club.
People praising each other, lifting each other up, a bunch of non-minority white guys that like to debate these types of issues, just constantly praising each other for the most mediocre stuff. But even when they are tagged hashtag not all of them, but some of them, I would get emails like, oh yeah, I sent so-and-so a recommendation for your work on Sam Harris. Or I would see things on their social media where people would be like bitching me out and they would completely ignore the part about me, but thank them for their compliments about them. And I'd be like, I would never do that. If I considered you a friend and someone came on my page and started saying, oh, so-and-so is such an idiot, but you're pretty good, I'd be like, oh, well, no, we're friends. Like, I don't agree with that. At least acknowledge. So yeah, there was like this avoidance around my work all the time, I noticed. And just that lack of engagement and just the whole bro circle jerk and the whole, saying that you care about propping up minority voices, but really very few minority voices ever appear on those places.
That's what I find is so interesting with Thomas. Like, he could have totally avoided all of this. He could have literally just not been a coward and said, hey, Ina, come on my show. We'll talk about it. Like, if he wanted, if he had his feelings hurt, I mean, that's the thing. These are fuck your feelings, the logic and reason crew. Like, you're literally supposed to be about data and about getting to the truth and facts and data and logic. But like, it's all like all the stuff like on Twitter, it's all centered around Thomas. Thomas centers Thomas rather than LGBT people, rather than people of color. He's centering himself in as the moral authority, and everybody else is good faith only if they agree with him.
Yeah, you said you felt that you were treated very differently than sort of white men in the even the progressive sort of spaces.
Absolutely, Kevin. So I could put out an episode very calmly criticizing Sam Harris, backing up every single one of my points with clips and references and whatever. I would be labeled as a hysterical, woman going over the top, or I would be tone policed for my sarcasm, or they would complain that I would, laugh too much or something. Whereas, a white dude putting out something with very little stuff to back up his points could actually rant and be, quivering in the voice and show emotion, but then I would see the comments under that, and people would be like, yeah, wow, you're so rational. You're so much more rational than Ina is. And I'm like, or someone would be like, you don't ever present a single argument against Sam Harris. And I'm just in shock. Like, have you heard any of my work?
Mm-hmm.
I go into such detail to present my arguments. So, things like that cumulatively over time, you start to realize how different the standards are. And even throughout all of this, right? The standards are that I'm the troublemaker and the divisive person for saying that, hey, do not defend things like New Atheism based on pedantic semantic quibbles, because that has serious implications for some of us. Whereas the people who have defended things like this are treated like, oh, so sorry that she was acting in such bad faith and you had to go through so much trauma, and oh my gosh, she did a laugh emoji. Oh my gosh, she's really enjoying your pain. Meanwhile, they can say stuff like complete lies about me, like, oh, they helped me start my podcast, and I'm an abuser, I'm a troll, whereas I am expected to just remain emotionless and address the arguments. I have addressed the arguments. I have,
like, literally, like, this is like, this is understand like in critical race theory and that type of thing, and understanding privilege. This is exactly like black people in America have to be perfect. Women have to be perfect because they are representing their gender or their race, but white men, they are just representing themselves.
I've tried not to make this personal, but the others making it personal are not held up to that standard.
Yeah, and it did get quite personal, didn't it?
Absolutely.
You've received some, frankly, I think what amounts to abuse from certain people who had a lot more respect before this, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, it's been mind-boggling, really. And then they are talking about the trauma that they have faced from reviving this whole discussion without any sort of self-reflection or thinking about the trauma that maybe minority people might be facing from reopening this discussion about the validity of New Atheism being far right or not based on a single word like merge.
Yeah. I was about to say, I don't know that there's necessarily a separation on the basis of those that tried an insurrection on January the 6th, because they were doing that in support of a president of whom tens of millions of Americans had just voted. So I don't think you can necessarily make, if that's your definition, I don't think you can make a real separation between the mainstream and the far right, because they're all essentially one and the same then, aren't they?
Possibly. I just don't, I don't, then it becomes, I guess I don't tend to use definitions of words in ways that would render them meaningless. Like if you want to define it that way, then far right and right are the same, and then there's no descriptive power in far right, and that's fine. Like I'm not saying someone can't do that. I just think that perhaps it's not the most useful way to do it.
Useful for who? That's what upsets me about this. Useful for who?
And especially when we're talking, and I see it in your chat, and this is something that comes up all the time. I get this comment all the time on my podcast that people want to say, well, America is actually just further right altogether, and so the American right is the far right. That's fine. Okay, that's fine. This is an American audience. This is an article written by an American about mostly Americans, except for like one person.
Okay, Thomas. Let's have a little fucking chat. You want to be this pedantic asshole that goes on and literally complains about one word, merge. So we're gonna go over here to Google Maps. Thomas, I want to ask you a question. Let's go way out here. Let's zoom way out. Way out. Okay. Thomas, let's have a little fucking lesson here. Thomas, what's this? What continent is this? This is North America. It's America, right? What's this? What's this down here? This is Central what? Central what? America. What's this down here? Oh, that's South America. Apparently you don't know what America means. This is the kind of pedantry that you're engaging in. It doesn't fucking mean anything. I know what you meant contextually, but I also know in Phil's piece what he meant contextually. And it's the same kind of pedantry that is just, it does nothing except stir up bullshit and harm marginalized communities. Why in the fuck would you do that? Oh, because it's interesting and you like to have this fucking you'd like to have this thought experiment. It's tiresome.
So I just, within that context, far right may mean a different thing than if you're, I don't know, in Europe or something. And it's not, I think it's weird to come in and say that we all have to be using your connotation of far right when it's, you know, this is pretty much exclusively an American context. Say like, why is this guy doing that? That's not, even though, by the way, I will emphasize yet again, I said many times in the course of the episode that I agreed with everything in the article.
Mhm.
Yeah, except he doesn't.
But I think it's gotten to the point where you realize, I think I've realized with him, like, I think the critics are right, you know, that he is, it's probably correct to call him far right. I don't think that's at all true about the other two people pictured in this headline, Richard Dawkins and Steven Pinker, especially Steven Pinker. I just feel like if there are any reachable people, and I think there inevitably are, because I get emails from them. If there are people who are fans of Steven Pinker because, you know, his linguistic stuff or his books on the Enlightenment. Oh, that sounds nice. Like Enlightenment, that's a cool thing. You know, that sounds like a nice word. If there's any people who are casual fans of these people and see New Atheists merge with the far right, they're going to be, well, that's shit. Like, there's no way that's true. There's no way Steven Pinker was one of the ones marching on the Capitol kind of thing, you know? And I just feel like, it's the most basic criticism to be like, maybe just don't overreach with your fucking viral headlines.
And then moving on, we get into some of the same old, yeah, Pinker has some gross views and some gross associations with Epstein. Does that mean he merged with the far right? Is that fair to say? You don't get to do this everything I don't like is far right thing. Yeah, okay, sure. Gross views don't necessarily make one right wing or overlap with the far right, but you know what could prompt people to think you're merging with the far right is when you sanitize literal far right talking points and legitimize them. Here's a paragraph from Jason Stanley's How Fascism Works. According to Evans in 2005, Pinker began popularizing the view that Ashkenazi Jews are innately particularly intelligent, a view that Evans describes as the smiling face of race science. The claim that Ashkenazi Jews are innately particularly intelligent invites the reader to draw conclusions about other groups and their innate intelligence. In a 2007 piece for the online venue The Edge, Pinker decries how political correctness has prevented researchers from studying quote-unquote dangerous ideas. including, quote, do women on average have a different profile of attitudes and emotions than men, end quote, and, quote, are Ashkenazi Jews on average smarter than Gentiles because their ancestors were selected for the shrewdness needed in money lending, end quote, and, quote, do African American men have higher levels of testosterone on average than white men, end quote. The concern about this kind of writing is that it presents those who seek a natural source for inequality as brave truth seekers, driven by reason to reject the heart's plea for equality. I mean, if that kind of shit isn't overlapping or merging with the far right, then really, I really don't know what is. And then much more recently, in 2018, there was some outrage on Centro Skeptic Twitter because people were critical of Pinker doing a video for Learn Liberty titled Political Correctness is Red Pilling America. And the thumbnail of the video, which has now mysteriously been changed, was really indistinguishable from any red pill, blue pill, alt-right-ish video at the time. Learn Liberty, who he did the video for, is a Koch-funded project and not the C-O-K-E kind either. In this video, he described the alt-right as highly literate, highly intelligent, internet savvy, and media savvy. And he basically said they were being radicalized because these truths were being hidden from them because of political correctness. The poor dears, truths like different ethnic groups commit crimes at different rates. Yeah, he's really worried about these things. And this was picked up by a literal Nazi blog called Fash the Nation, and they posted it as some great validation. They posted it with the subheading, Pinker spoke truths about race and sex differences while complimenting the alt-right. Now, I know Pinker didn't mean to be openly pro-fash here, but he did come off as making excuses for them and presenting them in a complimentary manner as victims of political correctness, and so appealed to a literal Nazi publication that broadcast his message far and wide. If that isn't validating the far right, I don't know what is. These are their talking points said in a more toned-down academic manner, of course. Oh, but come on, he votes Democrat. He danced when Trump was voted out. How could this be? I am very confused. So then there's a bunch more of quibbling with certain words in the title. I guess that's really what you have to work with when you are defending the honor of New Atheism in 2021. And I think we covered the
people who I think are the most gettable, and
remember what he said. He's totally a trans ally. He cares about trans issues.
And again, you won't hear me soft pedaling any of this on my show to try to reach out to awful people.
No,
that's not what I do.
No,
and
I don't.
And I want to speak
Agreed.
specifically on anti-trans stuff. I want to just take that for example. I'm incredibly emotionally connected to that issue. How
are you emotionally connected to that issue? Are you trans? Are you trans, Thomas? Do you love someone that's trans, or do you have a trans partner?
It affects me a lot, as I think you can hear.
How in the fuck does it affect you? It doesn't affect you. That's the whole point of this. That's what you won't fucking get. You refuse to get. It doesn't concern you. It doesn't impact you. This is a fucking hypothetical debate. Just because you interviewed somebody that's trans, or I have trans friends, doesn't mean that you're invested. Doesn't mean that you're and guess what? I've said this a million times, but people who are not in marginalized communities that are trying to be an ally, you don't get to decide when you're an ally. We'll tell you when you're being an ally. Right now, what you're getting ready to do is not being an ally. It's using the trans community for your fucking gets.
Here in the episodes I've done, it's very personal for me, and that's a battle I want to fight. I want to move people away from anti-trans bigotry if I can. I want to do everything I can to do that. And I think there are people who want to call, I don't know, IDW types or those types far right because of their anti-trans views. And I get that, morally speaking, where they're coming from, but I think that's a case where I think it's really ultimately going to do more harm than good. And I can't stop anybody else from doing it, but me personally, I would rather try to treat those people as reachable. Like, here are the facts about trans.
Like, we haven't done that. I haven't done that for 20 fucking years. I might know a little bit more about it than you, Thomas. I've literally fucking been an activist for the past 2 centuries, the past 2 decades. But no, you know how to win them. You know how to win them back. You just gotta get some logic in them and give them some facts about trans lives, and they're gonna come along. No. Jesus. I feel like I have the moment Marty becomes so angry, she becomes a vampire. Oh Lord. That's the thing. That's the thing that pisses me off. He somehow thinks that he has the secret. And he somehow knows how to talk to anti-trans people when, like, literally I've been doing this for 20 years. I'm the founder of Trans Advocate. For the first 10 years of Trans Advocate, that was what I was doing. I was engaging with people online. Fun fact, you don't win people over online. I mean, look at the facts. Look at the facts. Look at all the research that's been done on cognitive bias. You don't turn people online. The way you turn people is in their lives. Connecting. Me as a trans person, you know how I change people's minds? I become friends with them. I take them to dinner. I meet them on the street. I am nice to them and connect with them. I know that whenever I'm out and visibly trans, that the way that I am, that I'm going to have people that connect with me, and that experience gives them an idea of what trans people are. So that's important. But the thing is here, the gall of him to say that he has this magic fucking formula and he's going to use trans people and trans people's lives and rights aren't that important. These people are gettable. They're not right wing when they're anti-trans. They're just have a few issues. It's maddening.
Trans healthcare and like what trans people actually need and what's actually happening. Here are the facts about this, and the science quote unquote science you've been sold about this is wrong. I want to treat those people as not far right, unreachable people, but potentially reachable people with one, like a hypothetical person, one very bad set of views.
See, again, Thomas, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. TERFs, normally, in my 20 years of experience, I know you've been doing this a long time, Thomas, but I've been doing it for 20 years. In my experience, trans people aren't the only one these bigots dislike. TERFs are intersectional in their bigotry. Fun fact. God damn. I need some fucking gin in this. This is maddening. The gall that this guy, fucking cishet white guy, mediocre fucking white guy, thinks that he has a magic formula that somehow actual people doing actual work, street work, he has more of a magic formula that he can get through to people, that these are just one issue bigots. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. This pisses me off. This shit pisses me off. Anyways, we'll continue because I don't want this to be a 4-hour show.
That's built on ignorance. And I have reached people through that method, and I want to keep trying to do that if I can.
To say these figureheads merge with the far right isn't to say they themselves are card-carrying members of the far right or anything. This is the thing that probably bothered me the most about this particular defense of new atheism. It was the constant conflation in this podcast between merging with the far right and accusing them of being straight up far right. Surely anyone can see that these are different claims. Merging can mean allying with, overlapping with, sanitizing, rationalizing, and using the same talking point. Come on, really? Should we be sugarcoating things for the facts and logic crew? The fuck your feelings crew, even, is something that's a pretty reasonable claim, a basic truth. Clickbait, even. He's jumping on this current anti-CRT hysteria, too. If all it took to definitively prove someone wasn't right-wing or far-right friendly was their Trump criticism, then, Ben Shapiro was once a never-Trumper too. This is really the most shallow and lazy analysis, and I expected better. And saying people like Sam are on the left because they vote Democrat doesn't really prove that at all. Richard Spencer said he'd vote for Biden. He said he wants all sorts of social safety nets and health care. Our pal Dave Rubin claims to have voted for Obama in the past. He too used to defend his liberal cred by talking about his supposed left-wing views. I'm a gay married man. I'm pro-choice. I'm cool with pot. This is the same kind of excuse that people do for Sam now. Of course Sam is on the left because of these handful of things that he barely spends any time on. Sure, bud. He might have solidly been several decades ago with these same views, but as the left progresses and evolves, so too does the right. These things aren't static. To some extent, they do move with the times. Being pro-gay marriage doesn't make Sam all that left now, and didn't make Dave Rubin all that left when he claimed it did either. Now, what's an issue that's more telling regarding the present day discussion on LGBTQ issues? I'd say trans rights, and where does Sam fall on that? Oops, snickering with far-right Doug Murray, calling it a social contagion. That's not looking too good for Sam here. If you look at the issues that matter most to the left today, Sam is firmly on the opposite side of the majority of those issues. Simply being better than Republicans on a few things doesn't mean much. Why do I even have to explain this? You have to look at the bigger picture as a whole of what they're putting out into the world, what impact they're having. David Frum and Andrew Sullivan are both terrible but open right-wingers that have shown themselves to be to the left of Sam on things like BLM and also on things like not minimizing white supremacy. And to say that because these types of guys vote Democrat, they can't be merging with the far right as if that's some slam dunk. Come on. That is some Sam Harris level analysis. How can racism be a problem in policing when we've had black chiefs of police level of analysis? A lot of never-Trump Republicans voted Democrat. Does that put them on the left now? Right-wingery is a spectrum, too. And The Democrats aren't all that left compared to some other countries to begin with. There are more left-leaning Democrats and more right-leaning Democrats. Sure, they're not as right-wing as Republicans, but as far as being solidly on the left or right, that doesn't really prove anything. To just vote Democrat, especially if your bread and butter, your entire brand along with voting Democrat, is spreading anti-left hysteria. And you also happen to occasionally ally with or merge with the far right to do so. Jeez. Then we get to defending Dawkins, and we have shit like, yeah, sure, his views on rape versus mild rape are shitty. Yeah, he's an anti-Muslim bigot and an anti-feminist and has said awful things about telling women they should abort Down syndrome babies. But is everyone with shitty views on rape and who's an anti-Muslim bigot right-wing? Are there no bigots or racists on the left? Checkmate. New atheism critics. I mean, this is just an absolute straw man of the larger point, and once again, not engaging with the core criticism here. Of course, the article could have provided better examples here. However, it is quite something to pick these things apart to the level of individual words, but not engage honestly with the message as a whole. Of course, there can be racists on the left and sexists on the left and people with shitty views. But I think when we get into creepy eugenics type views, there are some far rightish alarm bells going off in my head, at least. And I mean, this is just one of the few eugenics-y types of things Dawkins has said that I can think of off the top of my head. The Salon article makes a broad case, but could have gone into more detail, so here are some better, more precise examples of Dawkins signal boosting, allying with, and propping up the far right. Sure, his anti-Muslim bigotry isn't the only thing that shows he's gotten in bed with the right, but I've been here in this new atheist scene for years, watching it all unravel, and have, for example, observed Dawkins promoting far-right Twitter account Jihadist Joe on several occasions, telling his audience to follow him because he's brilliant and lamenting the fact that he couldn't retweet all his tweets because that's how good they were. But even at that time, there were several people in the comments telling him what kind of account that was. Jihadist Joe's account doesn't exist anymore, but fuck, was it ever terrible, and obviously so. He would post blatantly racist caricatures on the regular. Racist memes, implying that Muslims are camel fuckers or savages or primitive and stuff, and Dawkins loved retweeting his horrendous quote-unquote satire about Islam. Even in the height of my New Atheist days, this was alarming to me. Jihadist Joe even organized some Muhammad drawing contest or some event, I don't remember the exact details, but it was with a known white supremacist. Dawkins never retracted support of him, though. Never. Jihadist Joe was frequently worried about cultural Marxism even back in 2015, and this is who Dawkins thought was a brilliant satirist to signal boost. He even doubled and tripled down on it. And after the tragedy at Charlie Hebdo happened, Jihadist Joe and friends started a blatantly racist publication called Vive Charlie, which Dawkins also promoted. It had gross anti-migrant cartoons, often on the covers, depicting them as insects infesting Europe, and they featured Katie Hopkins and received promotion from good old, certainly not merging with the far right in any way whatsoever, Richard Dawkins. Jump forward to today, and you've got Dawkins promoting literal Christian nationalist sovereign nations events featuring morning prayers to own the wokes. He has repeatedly promoted the penis hoax trio, that is Helen Pluckrose, Peter Boghossian, and James Lindsay, as has Sam Harris. And these horsemen certainly played their part in lifting these conceptual grifters to the point of prominence they are at today. And I absolutely must stress again that it's incredibly dangerous to excuse or minimize the harm caused by movements like New Atheism. The types of people that have sprung from it, been nurtured by it, just because they are embarrassing to you personally as an atheist now, or just because you don't want to acknowledge that you were once adjacent to this stuff. There shouldn't be any shame in admitting that we were once in this extremely gross scene and admired some of these people when things weren't as obvious as they are now. But many of us have evolved in our thinking and gotten out of it. I certainly have no trouble admitting that about myself. It's so harmful to be in denial about this stuff, and even more so to do it from the left, because all you're doing is providing credibility to a group of people that has, over the last few years, received quite a few well-deserved blows and been exposed to a large extent for what they are and who they associate with. If you're working to prevent people from seeing this, you're definitely not doing a good thing. It is not about gotchas. Like, is there no racism on the left? If you're anti-Muslim, are you automatically a right-winger now? Just stop and think about the bigger picture here. Who are these people associating with all the time? It's the right and far right, over and over again. Some of that maybe could be a result of people like Dawkins being older, but that's really just some of the more conservative views that you could attribute to it. But to get to the level of promoting Christian nationalists to own the libs, to promote deeply racist anti-migrant publications with racist caricatures in combination with the repeated anti-Muslimness, anti-feminism, anti-leftness, that is not down to just being older. There are plenty of older people who manage to avoid this level of bigotry and horrendousness.
I just had a thought. Maybe Thomas doesn't want to call Dawkins far right because he's trying to get him. He's trying to bring him back.
Okay, so then we get to the part where there's some complaining that Pinker isn't a new atheist. And really, we just keep going back to the same point, and that is that New Atheism isn't a well-defined club where there's some group photo you can cross-reference to confirm who the members are. Complaints with merge and far right pretty thoroughly, but then we get to the complaints about the word grifter. Okay, so I think the issue here is mainly definitional. Some people use grifter only to mean financial grift, and some use it to convey a general dishonesty and sliminess of character. And yes, I think it's clear that these guys are wealthy enough to not sell out for financial reasons. I think they truly believe in their fight and in the awfulness they spout. So that isn't what the word grift is meant to convey here, I think. In my interpretation, the griftiness lies in the intellectual dishonesty and the general dishonesty about their politics, presenting themselves as more left or as neutral, as ideology-free, when they really are very sympathetic to the right and biased and tribal and ideological, just like the people they criticize. And to an extent, I do think they genuinely believe they aren't super right-wing friendly, but the dishonesty comes in where they refuse to acknowledge their obvious double standards or to re-examine their views and endorsements of some very right-wing talking points and people. So, no, I don't think using softer terms like cultural conservatives describes this situation any better than to say they clearly have some overlaps with the far right, and alarmingly so, because the urgency of this situation, where these respected mainstream intellectuals are sanitizing and legitimizing some really reactionary far right stuff and figures, that urgency needs to be conveyed, and that is not the same as your slightly racist uncle at the dinner table making a cringe comment. This is a concerted effort to push things rightwards in a rebranded way and fight the left. That is the grift element. regardless of the twisted ways in which they may justify it to themselves. This isn't right-wing. I'm just being rational. My interest in race and IQ and Muslimic birth rates is based in science and reason. My interest in calipers is only because the left drove me to it.
You know what this reminds me of? Let me see if I can bring this in. This reminds me of I just hate this. You made me become a Nazi. It's your fault. I feel bullied. I just hate doing this. Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh Lord have mercy. Anyways. So let's get back.
Legitimate tension between making moral statements that I think are very important about like these beliefs are awful, these beliefs are far right, and morally I'm totally on board. There may be a different persuasive case though. There may be a case to be made that for persuasion purposes you would want to try to not lump some people into the far right if you could help it, because I think that will make it harder.
Here you go, Thomas. Here you go. Here you go. I'll show you an example when you're nice, when you try to use logic and reason. Like literally, Kevin and Christy were very nice to you, tried to explain privilege to you, yet you denied it, or and you pushed back against it. Like literally your own plan does not work again, because if you look at the studies of cognitive bias and people on the internet changing their minds, it's very rare. It rarely happens the way that you change minds. Like I said, I'm a trans activist going on 22 years of this shit. 20 years. I lost count. It's been 2 decades. But you know better. You know better. You can win them in. Because the whiteness, apparently the cishet whiteness is what wins the day.
To get them back. And I think that's borne out by a lot of the emails I've received. Like a lot.
My God. I mean, this is literally, what do they call that? It's not a non sequitur. It's basically, it's not evidence. It's your own evidence. This isn't, this is just your own. It's not even a study, and it's self-selected because you have this audience that wants to praise you and send you little letters. Oh, you saved me. You saved me. This isn't like you aren't doing the Lord's work. Anecdotal. Yeah, Adam. That's exactly right. You can't, in this situation, like I said, look up the studies on cognitive bias. You can go to Google Scholar and look them up. You change minds. And I was in the marriage equality fight as well. I was on a federal and state level. And we didn't win by debates. We didn't win talking to people online. It was the in-person connections. It was having a trans friend. It was having a gay friend. It was having a bi friend, a lesbian friend. So, yeah.
A lot of the people that I've pulled back from the IDW would have been people that this article, by its logic, would call far right, but I don't think they were. They were people who had a few centrist or IDW sympathetic views that I've pulled them back from, and I'm proud of that. And I think that
my God, when does this stop being about you? That's what I want to know. When does this stop being about Thomas and what Thomas has done? Like, literally, like, oh, fuck. It's not, it is, it just, I just get so fucking pissed off at this because, like, literally, it's like you're a fucking magician. Oh my God, I just need to bring Thomas into my town so he can fix the transphobia and win the people back.
So we can have that conversation. And again,
as I explained before,
like you fucking debate, if only Thomas would go back in a time machine to the 1940s so he could debate Hitler and win him back. Oh God.
the term new atheist is a broad and vague one. It isn't something most people self-identify as, especially now that the connotations associated with it are more widely recognized. Just like the IDW isn't restricted to the few people who originally appeared in Barry Weiss's embarrassing article introducing that clown show.
Because, again, it's a brand and it's a community.
Even though people tried to exclude Sam Harris from the IDW, and this was before his supposed retired monster he helped create, despite his appearing in that original introductory article. The apologists, once they realized how embarrassing and how much of a laughingstock the IDW became, would often try to exclude him simply because he wasn't as bad as Rubin or the Weinsteins, even though he himself chose to appear in the bushes as a renegade of the intellectual dark web. So just like we understand a particular type to be an IDWer now, similarly, new atheist also refers to a type, not just limited to the four horsemen and the people with one of the four horsemen in their social media profile pictures or anything. Just such a silly and strange defense of new atheism to try and exclude people from it around technicalities that can't concretely be proven either way. Now, it's true, Salon can be a bit imprecise and sometimes sloppy. It's not my favorite resource. I don't retweet many Salon articles, but I think this one made some good points and had some receipts. Of course, if you pick apart every single word simply because you didn't like the title and are refusing to engage with the main substance of the criticism, then sure, yeah, you can find little things to quibble with. But it's funny to me that saying Salon isn't the best source because of its history of bashing new atheists and mentioning how anyone remotely a fan of Sam's won't find it credible is even a point that was made. Yeah, okay, so a bunch of Quillette and Breitbart readers won't find this Salon article credible simply because it's in Salon. But, they don't really have a leg to stand on in that regard anyway. And I mean, if we're to go by the extremely non-hypocritical, consistent inventor of logic and reason, Sam Harris's words, the source simply doesn't matter. The claims should be judged on their own, no?
I'm happy to take that point from Hitler himself if it's interesting. The source simply doesn't matter.
And then to go on and say things like, what are we doing here? What's the goal here? To further inflame people with clickbait, people who might otherwise be reachable? Oh, I don't know. Are people that are still fans of Sam, Race, and IQ Harris in 2021 to be treated like reasonable, reachable people? Are we supposed to pander to their sensitivities now and dress it up in the hopes that maybe a few of them will stop supporting a guy you yourself say is racist and spreads racist views? I don't think so, personally. I think it's pretty gross to try and reach across the aisle to court fans of a race and IQ guy by trying to be soft and gentle with them. If they're truly reachable, then presenting evidence of his disturbing overlaps and disturbing behavior should be enough to reach them. But if they've observed Sam throughout the Trump era, focusing his energy on wokeness as the far right flourished, and observed him constantly downplaying white supremacy, even after the fucking insurrection, are these people who watch this happen during such a dangerous time to see how dangerously flawed Sam's assessments and priorities were and to still admire him as some great thinker? Are they who we should treat as reachable? And
By the way,
so on point. I know. So on point. That's the thing. They aren't reachable. They aren't reachable. And the stuff going on now from here on out is a little more it's a mishmash of stuff, but I did want to cover things that and discuss what time is it? Oh, okay. So I want to continue on. This is kind of a mishmash. It's funny because eventually Thomas does get there.
I think Sam Harris probably, he was the one where I said, this is the best case. And I've been convinced by some of the good faith criticism that, like, I think it probably is accurate to call Sam Harris far right.
Probably, maybe. I think Ina has literally shown that 3 out of the Steven Pinker, Richard Dawkins, and Sam Harris, at the very least, are alt-right or far-right or far-right supporting.
And that's not much of a move because I already believe that he was a pipeline to the far right and was running with far right people. You know, like I've already said those very things a lot. Was the most important thing that I'm sad that nobody talked about was that one point I wanted to make, and one reason I recorded the episode was my experience with the mainstream right is that almost every idea represented in this article as a far right idea is actually a mainstream right idea. And
see, here's the thing. Thomas doesn't know about what moderate Republicans are. There are moderate Republicans. There's less and less of them. Susan Collins being one, Mitt Romney being another. I mean, you can go down the list. There are moderate Republicans, people that don't support Trump. Again, they're less and less. But that being said, you need to, if somebody is, or a lot of the Republican Party is far right. I mean, you literally had 70 to 80 million people vote for Trump. Trump is far right. He literally caused a fucking insurrection. He had people throwing shit through the halls of Congress.
it's fine if if people have a different definition and they want to call that far right, that's fine. But I actually wanted to point out that, like, racism is mainstream right. Like, Islamophobia is a mainstream conservative view. Anti-immigration, like all this stuff. And so for I guess in my mind, the label is more useful if you reserve the far right for the people who are marching in Charlottesville and marching on the Capitol. And I think that's a more useful definition, but it's not the only one around. And I get that other people may use that differently. I think that if you define these,
helpful for who? Helpful for who? That's what I always go back to with this. Who is it helpful for? Helpful for you?
Things as far right, then what's true is that the American right is actually entirely far right, like almost all of them.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So in terms of the actual article, are you a lot of your beef, if you will, with it seemed to be the use of one particular word, that being merged, that you were okay with the concept, or you agreed with the concept of it being a sort of pipeline where it led people to, or those
For Sam Harris,
yeah.
For Sam Harris and probably Dawkins and anyone involved in that awful, like anti-Muslim bigotry pipeline. Yeah, absolutely. I think they've led people far right for sure. It's awful.
Yeah, and I think that goes back a long way, because you seem to put a time scale on it in terms of the death of Christopher Hitchens being the end of New Atheism. But I think it goes back even further than that, though, doesn't it? And the basis that, if you remember the quote-unquote Ground Zero Mosque, and a lot of the people in New Atheism who unfortunately bought into that nonsense, I think that you can see the roots of the alt-right in that kind of creeping, disgusting Islamophobia.
To do is add to that or stir that up. And I just want to say, for the record, I adore everybody, forgive my personal relationships with each of them, and I want to make sure that whatever gets discussed, I just want this to be an open discussion where you don't feel judged. And I'm going to.
This is from the intro, Christy. Like, basically, they're hand holding this guy.
If I talk a lot about myself, I am only talking about myself. So today I listened to your podcast. I listened to two other Ina's, and I listened to Eli's. And it definitely seems that people who read this headline, there was a lot of interpretations, a lot of perspectives. And so, I want to kind of talk about the difficulties of being in a mass movement like atheism, where you end up having people at such a wide range, and good people fighting the good fight, also assholes that are trashing, like the thing that you care about.
Emphasize something. Sorry to interrupt, but the actual headline that Phil wrote this article under is nothing like the one they put there. And it's really a weird experience to be slammed when I said, I agree with everything in the article. This headline sucks. And
you didn't. Now, I did question him on Twitter and about this, because obviously from what I've shown, he doesn't agree with everything. He doesn't think that Dawkins or that Pinker are far right. And then he goes on, the guy's being super pedantic about the title, but he's being sloppy about what he's saying. Like, he's not applying his own kind of critique to himself. It's fucking maddening. By the way, and then it got onto the topic of Dave Silverman, which, if anybody doesn't know, Dave Silverman was another one of these guys that, would sit there and say that they were, that they were progressive. And then when they get caught, they turn out to be these right-wing chuds. So, but this is Thomas's take on it.
Back in some of my emails with him, and it's very interesting.
David Silverman was, he's another case of a person who you realize what a shit he was much later on.
He's an interesting case. I was going to, there's so much to talk about here. Sorry, I could just go on forever, but the Silverman thing is interesting because I believe, and feel free to, push back by all means, but in thinking it over, I think David Silverman reflects well on the atheism community, because he had to pretend to be some sort of left adjacent person, and he had to give nods to social justice in order to lead what might be the biggest atheist organization in America, which is, American Atheists. He had to pretend to be a lefty. Yeah. After the Sargon thing, he made this heartfelt statement. He came on my show and I hadn't done anything with him prior to that, but I saw his statement, and, I was like, gosh, I really want to echo and kind of signal boost the fact that prominent atheists are saying this shit sucks. MythCon sucks. And he came on, he gave a heartfelt thing about how, inclusivity and like we don't allow this in our movement and the and then when it becomes clear that he's guilty of some sort of impropriety, it's not, I don't think it's all public, but something, and he gets kicked out of leadership in American Atheists, that's when he has to make this right-wing turn, because there's nowhere else to go. The right is the place where people, it's not only not disqualifying to be an awful person, it's almost more qualifying, like you get more notoriety on the right
You get
if you're an asshole.
Well, I think the ultimate of that is Donald Trump, of course, who
Sure,
a lot of people,
I think Kevin last.
Well, and then Ina covers it here and exposes Thomas again.
Stream, you said that a lot of these atheist guys, they kind of shift right words because when they're outed as sex pests or whatever, progressives / atheists don't tend to like it, and it's not such a bad thing on the right, so then they just move to the right, which, I mean, to some extent that's true, but they're also like right-wing atheists who totally embrace them. It's not that the atheists as a whole reject them. So Lawrence Krauss, after he was written about multiple times being a sexual predator, he has been welcomed with open arms by many atheist podcasts. One of them even related to Atheist Ireland, or one of the people who used to work for Atheist Ireland runs that podcast. So and then the large atheist accounts like Atheist Republic, like standing up for Lawrence Krauss, for David Silverman.
Atheist Republic sucks.
That wasn't even a point about atheists as such, because like you say, there are right wing and left wing atheists. It's not politically, again, it's not what you don't believe, it's what you do believe, So
but that was the point Thomas was making. So I just
okay, maybe it was slightly crossed wires on that front.
People get hooked, like Sam Harris and whatever else, like he went from he moved his whole body of fan base, right, over to religious people now start to follow.
No, I don't think that's true.
Okay.
I know that was said on your last stream. Again, as I said, this is like a case study in white guy revisionism, white guy alternate reality. Okay. I don't think that's accurate at all. Just because he has allied with people like Ben Shapiro and stuff like that occasionally, it doesn't mean that his whole you're free to disagree with me. If you disagree, please let me know.
I think let's say he expanded his fan base because he's talking about certain topics and started talking about other topics.
Right, but the large chunk of that is still rational atheist bros. Sure, there are others right now, but there's how could you? On what basis are these people saying that he's shifted his fan base from atheism?
Fair enough.
Also, it was said on Eli's podcast that Sam Harris was rejected by atheists. It's just an alternate reality. It's not true at all. In fact, that is how the merge happened. That is like they were happy to ally with anyone that was anti-woke.
Yeah.
And getting back to that, when I think that's kind of where Eli was coming from a little bit. Like he's been out there, he's been doing work. A lot of people have been doing work to be positive about atheism. And who gets the fucking headlines? Are these pieces of shit, right?
It's frustrating. Go ahead. I don't want to.
No, okay. And so I think his perspective, again, intersectionality, he was coming at it from an activist point of view, saying, and then you kind of made the same point that if you actually look at atheists as a group and new atheists, are kind of like people who started being atheists from the 90s. That's kind of like when the explosion started as a movement, are way far to the left on issues. So again, to be defined by these very famous pieces of shit who have a lot of influence and are doing a lot of harm, is I could kind of like hear the frustration in his voice because that's not how he wants to be defined.
It's frustrating. And the least I feel like here's what I feel. The least we can do, or the least someone like Salon could do, is just be slightly more targeted in their viral headline. Like, is that hard to just say like
who in the fuck is he talking to? Like, is he having a debate with the Salon editors? Jesus Christ. I don't get it.
These new atheists became a pipeline to the right, or like, is it that hard to do? And I know it's a minor thing, but this whole thing is a minor thing. Honestly, I don't think anybody really disagrees about that much. I mean, I've slammed these very same people for almost everything that is in this article.
Well,
I've already, let's go ahead.
Well, as always, it's a perfectly reasonable in many respects piece of journalism ruined by clickbait editors doing their nonsense. Yeah. Which is really frustrating, because I think there is an interesting discussion to be had. Me and Christy have tried for many years now to try and expose the ways in which certain shitbags have tried to, whether knowingly or unknowingly, I suppose in some cases, push people to that far right place. I think it's really destructive and cancerous. And I think it was Eli that made the point in his diatribe thing that atheism goes beyond just the philosophical notion of whether there's a God or not, that social justice should be a part of that, that the part of the reason that religiosity is so toxic in many respects is because of the bigotries that come along with it, and that's what should be fought against.
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, I gave a talk once, actually. I just was going to say that. I mean, maybe not atheism, but at least humanism, I do not believe is compatible with anything the right is doing. I mean, I don't think it's compatible with the state of.
You may think that's why this drives me batty. Like, this is a no true Scotsman fallacy
of my country right now, like injustices, racism, income inequality, just all this. Humanism is not compatible with that. And if you call yourself a humanist, I don't believe you unless you're out there trying to help the slightly better than actually the notably better side win these political battles. And that was what really, I guess, took away any sympathy I had for a lot of these right-wing assholes like Sam Harris and others, was, and not just them, like the atheists that harassed me forever, the shitlords after the Sargon thing, where I really lost any sympathy for this, Enlightenment values thing, is when they utilized those Enlightenment values kinds of things to argue.
Who's big on Enlightenment values? Remind me, Steven Pinker.
In ways that enabled the right, which then enabled fundamentalist Christians to be in control of our Supreme Court, which then enabled the biggest encroachment on religious freedom that we've ever seen in this country. The fact that that main issue, if your only issue, for some reason it shouldn't be, but if your only issue was religious freedom and actual separation of church and state, you should be doing everything you can to get Republicans out of office. I mean, it's just not even close.
Yeah.
Literally, this drives me, some random geek makes a good point. Enlightenment gave us liberalism, which liberalism gives capitalism as a given. Very true.
I think you've seen that to a degree where there's an overlap between those who went down that pipeline from atheism, where they're now starting to agree massively with fundamentalist Christians and indeed fundamentalist Orthodox Jewish people in terms of the Israel-Palestine thing. There's a lot of crossover with the far right. There's a
lot of crossover. Maybe it's merging
atheists and the far right religious crazies as well. It's an odd alliance, but it's very much a part of things.
Yeah,
and
it's like
a
certain segment of the crowd, of the atheism crowd, that I think really is the online YouTuber shitlord atheist community mostly. I think they are those the guys you're trying to win over, by the way? Latched onto the cruelty. I think they latched onto the Hitch slap. Oh, look at Hitchens embarrass somebody on whatever. They latched onto that cruelty part, and I think a lot of other really good people latched onto other parts. There's nothing wrong with enjoying a good argument, but
yeah, there's nothing wrong. I mean, that's ultimately what pisses me off about his quote arguments, it's all about, this is a good time. We're going to have a good time. This is all hypothetical, except it's not. And he doesn't fucking acknowledge the communities that are harmed when Richard Dawkins makes statements about Muslims. Like there was literally, I think it was recently, there was a acid attack here in London. And I believe it was in Ohio. There was a family run down in a vehicle, a Muslim family. This shit has consequences. It's just not fucking debate for some people. It impacts lives. It kills people. But you go on, have your fucking debates.
But like the cruelty wasn't the point for a lot of people, I think. And for some people, the cruelty was the point, and they took that aesthetic and applied it to a bunch of things, mainly like feminists online, as I'm sure Christy is familiar with.
I remember this. Yeah. Where were we going to go after this?
I have no idea.
I mean, we could probably just at least put a bow on the salon piece. I mean, I'll just say that, you know, like if anyone came into this and didn't know me and thought my focus on it showed that I cared too much about, you know, like defending new atheists, I'm sorry you came to that conclusion. I'm sorry that I led you to that conclusion in this episode. And you know, it's not what I intended to do. And I tried to make as clear as I could that I agreed with the article. But it sounds like even just focusing on this at all may have been, you know, not the best use of my time. And I acknowledge that.
It's not about the best use of your time. It's about marginalized communities that are impacted by, I mean, how many times did Christy in this fucking interview say that to Thomas and he not get it? He purposely, I don't know. Is he just, I don't know. Is he dense? Does he not comprehend? Or just, is he just, I don't know. Because she laid it out time and time again. There are people that are impacted by your debates, your interesting questions. Their lives are impacted. That,
and I think I would have done it differently or not even bothered. And so I think that's that. I don't think we really disagree much. I also just thought it was interesting to talk about some of the new atheist history, and to talk.
That's the thing in all of this. The new atheist history wasn't even, because basically he lumped the entire atheist community, him and Eli, lumped it all in together, just like it was a fucking turd mountain. It absolutely made no sense.
Talk about whether or not it's effective. I said this is why I actually did talk about it. Again, I think it is a worthwhile conversation to talk about which labels are effective when. You know, I'm not prescribing what everybody needs to be saying when they say far right, but I am suggesting that there are ways.
Wait, Thomas. I think I have a sound for you.
But you are, Blanche. You are.
You are. That's exactly what you're doing.
Ways to use these labels that might be more effective if you are trying to persuade people. Maybe you aren't. Maybe you don't care about that, and that's fine. Maybe you are making moral statements, which I do as well, and that's fine. But like in my experience, it would be more effective to try to mitigate some of this awful harm by trying to get some of the reachable people. I'm not talking about the race scientists. I'm not talking about the far right, actual far right people, but the people who have bought into the veneer of rationality. I think those are reachable people.
I was about to say, if you're not talking about Ray scientists, what did you talk about, Sam Harris?
Yeah, I never suggested that I was trying to reach Sam Harris. I'm not trying to reach Sam Harris. Yeah, that's precisely.
I'm going to move on.
But I think that's a huge difference from saying that I am actually on the other side of this. I am not on the other side of this. And it's frustrating to know better who know me say that I am, because I'm not. I think that, you know, I think my work kind of speaks for itself there. And
Yep, it does. And your work is all about you. You showed through this entire thing exactly who you are. You showed yourself to be someone that centers themselves in all things. And nothing pierces that. Nothing gets through to that. Being nice to you doesn't get through to that. Walking on eggshells for you doesn't get through to you. Telling you peeling it all off and putting it to you just flatly, like both Ina and I have done on Twitter, doesn't work.
have to trust that on some level, if people are going to engage with my work on good faith, they'll come to that conclusion.
Really been appreciating your Twitter, and you seem to be like.
Now, there was a point in Ina's interview with Christy that I found it was uncomfortable, and but it was uncomfortable in a good way, I think.
Like very actively diving into some anti-racism stuff lately. But I thought it was interesting that who you chose to hear from first. Because how did this all come about? I believe it was a group tweet that was sent to, I think, directed at Chrisiosity. And Kevin, I was asking her on. And then
I literally the first person I wanted to have on was Chrisiosity, who was one of the guests on your show, right? Yeah, and then sort of
but then we all kind of agreed we all kind of agreed on the thread to do it, right?
But then
so I assumed it would be a group conversation, but I assumed that someone did not want to be speaking with me, which is fine.
Well, no, it's because the drama sort of kicked off between you and Thomas that we thought it was probably best not to have you both on the same show. So we just thought that would probably be best for both of you.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Look, it would have been great for ratings, but I don't want to be drama-y amongst generally decent people, you know.
Hey, I can speak civilly when I have to. It doesn't have to be like Jerry Springer.
It doesn't have to be, but it often devolves into that, and that's great.
So I thought it was interesting who you chose to have on first.
Okay.
But and it certainly wasn't intentional, I'm sure.
Interesting in what? Why?
I think in terms of this, I think this goes to show you that a lot of times bias isn't something that's thought about. It just happens because people are conditioned, because it's something that Kevin and Christy should have had a conversation about. Literally having Thomas on first allows him to build a narrative. And everything that's said after that is in a response to. So I definitely think that I'm not saying that Kevin or anyone else had some nefarious ideas, but a lot of times bias comes out on accident. It's cultural conditioning. It's history.
Interesting that the white guy gets to talk first about his experiences and perspective, and sort of whitewash how things went down.
Okay, but I mean, it doesn't. It wasn't intended in that way.
Of course
from
not.
my perspective.
Yeah.
It was just happened to work out that way. Look, I don't particularly care who gets to speak first or last on a thing.
The reality, for me, I think, is that Ina is a very straightforward person, and Thomas depends on emotion a lot of times and plays on people's emotions rather than using facts and logic and examples for his arguments. It's about feelings. It's about good faith action, and that's the thing. You can never know someone's intent. You just judge them by their words and what they do. You can't know their intent.
And I'm sorry if you felt slighted by that, but that wasn't our intent, or my intent. It's nothing to do with Christy in terms of the arranging of the thing, so that's not on her at all. It's me on that one, but I didn't intend to offend you.
No, I know you didn't.
Yeah.
It just works out like that often in situations, more than this one.
Yeah. Okay.
So.
And he did kind of invite himself on anyway, because to be honest with you, I wasn't, and that's not even a criticism of him necessarily, but I just wanted to talk to Christy because I thought, well, she's got an interesting take on shit, and I didn't think
Christy or Chrissy?
Christiosity, that is. Sorry, yeah.
Okay.
Along with Chris, because this is like a show we do together, so
Right,
Christy would have been as well.
Right.
We thought you were too big for us.
Yeah, exactly. I thought you and Thomas probably wouldn't want to bother, but Christiosity,
knows us.
No, but I
she'll
said
talk
I
about
would
any old
happily
shit,
come on the thread. I was.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I think even now, in a moderated setting, I think Ina would be fantastic. Again, it's because Thomas uses emotion rather than facts and logic that it would turn into a dumpster fire, I think. Because again, it bears repeating, how many times did Christy talk about privilege? Repeatedly. And Thomas, I mean, she even included him into the discussion about it, saying, you believe this, and what did he do? He went and just pushed that aside and kept going.
Happy to come on, but
Yeah.
yeah, I thought it was a bit well, I guess you didn't maybe have all the full context, but I thought it was very whitewashed. Yeah, I thought it wasn't an accurate representation of what happened. So
okay, so do you want to give us your interpretation then?
Well, yeah, I am. I'm in the middle of it.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Yeah. So
would you have preferred to have come on first then?
I mean, I don't think it would make such a huge well, who knows? Maybe. I don't know. I just think that it often is that people always want to hear from the white guys first. Yeah. And so it just sucked that it worked out that way, even though it may not have been intentional. But I just think it's just wild how it's been sort of. I found this whole thing to be like a case study in, white guy revisionism, like just an entirely different reality from what so many people have experienced, and multiple people, not just one person. And I think that's been very harmful because it has caused people among the already not so huge left portion of left atheism to feel a need to pick sides, and it sucks that it had to happen at all. And I don't think that minorities are to blame for standing up and saying, like, no, don't have this pedantic debate. Don't put out an entire podcast to quibble with a single word in a title, and don't minimize the harms of new atheism. And I laid my case out point by point with like many major actors and tried to demonstrate how they in fact did merge with the far right. Like, people keep saying this is a clickbaity title. I don't think it's all that inaccurate, or, you know.
I have to say, I did learn from the panel. I didn't realize the connections between leaders of white supremacist groups, individually, you know, like being atheists. In that, yeah, I mean, I didn't know that, and I felt ashamed that I didn't. You know, I was like, that's a miss on my part. So,
I mean, this isn't about wanting to make anyone feel ashamed or bad.
But I should know that. I should know that. You know, I've been in this, I've been doing atheism stuff for like earlier than I was doing the stuff I'm doing now, right? I should know that. But how did I miss that?
Well,
it's
you know how you missed it is because a lot of atheist organizations did not want to talk about it. They did not want people to know that these people are atheists.
Yeah, so I think you mentioned the crying Nazi as an example.
Yeah, Christopher Cantwell, yeah. He was
Richard Spencer.
Yeah. Cantwell's an interesting one because he used to be like just a basic libertarian atheist type guy, and now he's like a weird Nazi atheist guy.
Yeah, like, so, like, if you think that the word.
So anyways, there's a couple more I wanted to play. This is from Ina's actual podcast again.
Trying to counter all the awful takes on new atheism within new atheism can kind of feel like trying to put out a forest fire with a thimble, maybe. And it certainly doesn't help that I'm not a straight, cis, white man. So it often doesn't matter how well I present my arguments, how well researched and backed up they are, how I do it with a smile on my face. I am still constantly told I'm too emotional and hysterical and not putting forth any arguments at all, which is laughable, really, if you just listen to the detail I go into in my work. But fucking podcasting is a boys' club itself, and especially in the atheist scene, and disappointingly, even in the more progressive IDW critical scene too. I don't have the stats for these specific niches of the podcasting world, but if you look up the general stats, they're fucking depressing. According to The Wrap, in August 2020, women represented about half of podcast listeners in the US, but an overwhelming majority of the top charting shows across the 4 major podcast platforms were hosted by men. In fact, men hosted or co-hosted 79% of the most downloaded podcasts. This is sort of like how LeftTube or RedTube could definitely also use some more diversity. So too could the atheist/IDW critical sphere of podcasting. And more diverse voices could certainly be highlighted and propped up by people who purport to care about these things. Honestly, it would really benefit from a wider variety of perspectives, especially minority ones, because sometimes people that have certain privileges can miss a few things. And personally, I have certainly sensed,
Thomas, I think she's talking to you.
some odd friction and general weirdness from the broadcasters of this tiny scene. Often they won't engage with stuff that I put out, even if it's right up their alley, even if people are constantly tagging them in it. It's just quite evident and awkward that they'd rather avoid it. So anyway, it's been weird to notice and realize that people I thought were allies and people I've supported and expressed solidarity with and promoted weren't exactly, oh well, say la vie. Anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, so I've been trying to.
Well, and some random geek says, who has the free time to devote to starting a podcast or a YouTube channel? Usual cishet white dudes. That, and the case with this, what she's saying here, like, she gets treated differently. She doesn't get the back slaps when she does stuff. She gets criticized in a way that only marginalized community members that create podcasts get criticized. People like Thomas get a free pass. That's the thing, though. Marginalized community members are not going to give him a free pass. You know, I don't, and that's the thing. I don't give a fuck. I don't care. I don't care if I get. Here's the thing. I'm not jack shit within the fucking atheist community because trans people don't have platforms in the same way that cishet people do. That's just a fact. And we're, you know, we're not going to be at, you know, I have been to conferences, but they have been basically to the left. Secular women. I spoke to the secular women conference. But this isn't something that it is the brocaster. It's definitely a boys club. It's boys watching. I'm reminded of that guy that was complaining about Twitch being ruined by women. But it seems this like the same thing. But like literally, Ina has a much heavier burden to carry, and she's criticized a lot more for a lot less.
I wrap my head around why in 2021 someone who seemed to get it would suddenly put out content defending the honor of new atheism. I don't know. Maybe sometimes privilege blinders, or sometimes competitiveness for fresh, unique, contrarian content, or
yeah, I think that's a bit of it, because I mean Thomas is saying, well, I just wanted to have a conversation. But it doesn't think about how those conversations actually impact other people.
maybe some residual defensiveness about atheism results in some terrible takes, and so we see things bizarrely coming from the progressive corners, defending the new atheists. Imagine choosing this hill now. Jeez. Incredibly disappointingly treating me or my work with the respect I had been giving them. But that's a side point on the general state of even the more progressive corners of the atheist skeptosphere podcasting. It really sucks not to be a bro and not to have a built-in circle jerk. When it comes from someone you thought was on the right side of this, like heart-sinking disappointment, because it just kind of washes over you in that moment, the realization of the magnitude of BS that needs to be fought on this front.
Well, that's the thing. This is why I wouldn't consider myself an atheist podcaster or an atheist. This channel to be an atheist. You know, I do in my intro say that I'm an atheist, but it's not something that I wear as and specify. I mean, more than anything, I'm an intersectional feminist, an intersectional person fighting for the civil rights of people in marginalized communities. But when you have these dudes that they don't want you in their community anyways, and they have no time for you. You know, I mean, Thomas has shown that with his disdain for both Ina and myself on Twitter. He can't engage in his, and even when he's treated with kid gloves, the way that Kevin and Christy treated him, he still can't hear it.
And we've got to depend mostly on straight cis white guys because that's who people mostly choose to listen to. Again, nothing wrong with straight cis white guys. Some of them are wonderful. But many are often seeing things through a very specific lens where they...
A lens that doesn't give a shit about the feelings and the lives of other people in their definitions.
They miss the urgency and scale of the issues because they aren't impacted by them as much. It's perfectly expected coming from IDW fans or right-wingers or even people pretending not to be right-wingers. But when it's people on your own quote-unquote side putting IDW-esque apologetics out, it truly is hard to describe the level of hurt and disappointment. I'll try and convey it, though.
About the points. But the response to that just got so out of hand with multiple meltdowns all over social media, multiple lies and just misrepresentations that it just had to involve drama for some reason.
Yeah,
and of course I'm probably going to be blamed for it because I'm the hysterical woman. So yeah.
Well, so yeah, it's a point that I think bears repeating, the fact that women are put in like an unwinnable situation. That you were saying you were criticized for not naming names, and then when you did name names, you were just being like a drama queen type thing. Yeah. Which is it's an impossible, you know.
It is impossible.
Did I have anything more? I don't think I did. I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. Ina did. I don't know if I played it or not, but there was a place where Ina talked about trans people coming to her defense. And I think there's a reason for that. It's because trans people, it's not the same experience, but we know what it's like to be marginalized outside of a community. I feel like I've been marginalized outside of the secular/atheist community. I mean, like even some place like the ACA has basically thrown trans people under the bus repeatedly. And we're sort of used to it. And I think Muslims within or former Muslims within the within atheism probably feel this close to the same way. Not the same experiences, but the same ostracization and the same it's almost like brick walling. And not promoted or anything. It's one of those things that it ends up, you feel like you're yelling into the void. But I'm going to keep yelling into the void. And I'm going to stick up for people that I think are being gaslit. And I think Thomas has gaslit Ina. And it's something that Adam said, I have to run to the gas station. We'll be here as long as there's continued talk, but I'm going on 2.5 hours, right? Yeah, almost 3. So we may be done. That being said, if people continue to have conversations, I'm going to stay here. But it's something that I feel like there's solidarity I feel like I have solidarity with people like Ina and creators that are from marginalized communities, because we're all we've got, you know. And it's not saying that I don't have cishet friends. I do, but it's not something that it's trust but verify, and that's kind of the attitude that I have. I don't give cishet people, cishet white people, I don't give them the benefit of the doubt in the way that I used to. It's trust but verify. It's not something that I want to, that's not the way that I want to feel, but it's the experience that I've had in the community. Like literally just being pushed to the edge. That's something else that I wanted to talk about in terms of I mean, like there's so much history like that we don't talk about. I mean, people talk about movement in a community. There are people that are doing the work in the community, and those are different than the people that are doing the debating. You know, Bill Maher isn't somebody that is doing the work. You know, it's like people like Debbie Goddard and Stephanie Zahn and others that are doing the work inside the community. It's not Lindsay Bogosian. It's not even to the left. It's not Thomas or Eli. And you know, we need to acknowledge that. And we also need to acknowledge the history from Sam Harris. I mean, I'm going to switch over. See if I can find my browser here. Like this was literally a post by Sam Harris in 2005 called "In Defense." Oh, poo. In defense of torture. Like where he was calling for the torture in Iraq and around the world. Like literally this is kind of where I feel like a lot of the split in the community started around Iraq, support of the Iraq war. But then when I think it was like 2011, 2012 when the whole elevator gate happened. And soon after that, there was the slime pit. Slime pit literally was created as a place. It was like a 4chan for atheists. And there's been this division. Places like the Orbit are places where atheists to the left publish. Ophelia Benson splitting off, going into turfdom. I mean, there's all these splits that you can see happening along the way. And people just think of it as the atheist community, and there isn't such a thing. There is a left and a right. There's an IDW. There's an atheism plus, even if people don't call it atheism plus anymore. There is a leftist side of atheism, secularism, and there's a right side. And that right side splits into the IDW and supports it. It's a pipeline, you know? It's a fucking merging. But people don't want to call it that, you know, because they don't know history. They haven't lived through this history. I've watched this from the outside because I'm not allowed in for the most part. There are people that are on the social justice side, and there are people that are on the IDW side. The biggest thing that came to me from Ina's conversations in this light is that there's no membership card, as she said. There's no it's this vague gray thing, but we need to talk about it, especially in terms of history. And you can't have these definitions of far right. I mean, my God, if you voted for Trump, you're far right. Sorry, you are. You supported a guy that wanted to overturn a democratically elected presidential election. If that's not far right, I don't know what the fuck is. It's just so frustrating. Anyways, and I hope you guys enjoyed this show. I enjoyed putting it together. It was a lot of listening. It wasn't a torture, Sam. It was. I learned a lot. And I mean, I've been a supporter of Ina's for quite some time, so I know her work, and I've enjoyed it. But it gave me a new appreciation for Ina and for Christiosity. And it gave me an idea of where I am in the community, and I mean, I do have allies, but they're few and far between. But they're the ones that I do have are fucking awesome. You know, trust but verify. That's all I'm gonna say. And when somebody says that they're a trans ally, or they're a feminist, or they're an LGBT ally, fuck them. Don't believe them. You'll know when someone's an ally because you'll see it. You'll see it. The people, the Jamie Kilsteins of this world that go around saying that they're a feminist, those people, they aren't your allies. They're trying to wear it like a badge. They're not doing the work. They want cookies. That's probably the biggest thing that's bothered me about Thomas here. He wants cookies. And you don't get you aren't going to get cookies here. Anyways. Yeah, some random geek. It's kind of saying, I am a nice guy. Why won't you love me? Why don't you like nice guys? I'm a nice guy. Yeah, exactly. Anyways, if you want to help the show, go to teapartypodcast.com. And you'll find my link tree that's got links to all my socials, to my Patreon, Just about everything, really. Also, don't forget, if you like this show, you'll probably like Social Justice Alchemy, because it's awesome. And it'll be on tomorrow at 7 p.m. London time. I believe that's GMT. I don't know anymore. But anyways, go listen to Social Justice Alchemy. I don't know what they're having on the show tomorrow, but it's awesome. And they're my friends. What else was I going to say? Oh, charitylinks.page. If you want to do some mutual aid for our friends in need, visit charitylinks.page. And you too can engage in some mutual aid that's going to help our NBs and our brothers and sisters in need. I think that's it. I think that's the show for tonight. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for listening. Thank you for participating. We'll be back probably with our regular content on, we'll probably have a gaming show on Monday, and then we'll have our regular show on Wednesday. Full of TikToks because I have a bunch. Anyways, thank you guys for coming. Have a good night.